it really comes down to also, it's going to enhance your overall experience in life. I mean, music, it just broadens your horizon in so many other ways, not just art, but in culture, in philosophy, in speech, and writing. It broadens everything. It gives you a much more well-rounded life experience.
That's very good.
I was getting a little philosophical there.
My name is James Anagnoson. I'm a pianist, and I'm the Dean of the Gould School at the Royal Conservatory of Music.
My name is Thomas Torok. I'm a pianist and a piano teacher, and I study at the Royal Conservatory's Gould School.
Well, Thomas was living south of Barrie and came down to Toronto and played for me. He was probably, were you 14?
13 or 14.
13 or 14. And he came down and played for me, and I said, to my ears, I immediately heard something artistically that was his own voice. So I have a limited amount of teaching. I'm fortunate that I have a former student who's now in his late 30s, probably maybe 40, a guy named Lee Wang, who's won international competitions and who is a bit like my kid brother. And I work with him as I have all of my students work with us. So when I met Thomas, I said, okay, what I want you to do is study with Lee, come down and take lessons with Lee, and get you set up pianistically, and then we'll see where it all goes. So his talent blossomed year by year. I would hear him occasionally coach him, and when he came and auditioned at Glen Gould School, he did a fantastic audition, and so he became my student at Glen Gould School. But all of my students also work with Lee, so it's kind of a family thing.
So I started piano roughly when I was about 6 years old. My parents saw that I was very musically inclined early on. When I was maybe around 2 or 3 years old, I would always be humming, singing, and we always had a toy keyboard at home. And whenever I would pick out melodies on it, or have either my mom and dad pick out melodies on it, I was always that kid that would just associate music with being alive and with life, and even go as far as, my stuffed animals. They would have magical powers and be able to fly when there was music. Without music, nothing was possible. And so I think my parents saw that early on. You can put 10 kids in a kindergarten classroom with toy instruments and they'll play along, 5 minutes each. But that one kid who can spend a half an hour just admiring it and playing, and the parents wonder, is he okay? Is that kid all right? That's the kid you need to watch out for. And so I was sort of that type, and they got me into music lessons very early on. My family's from Hungary originally, so they came out to Canada when I was around 4 years old. And so after about 2 years of settling down, age 6, they decided, we're gonna give you a head start and see, if you like it or not. And to be honest, the first year I didn't like it at all. I loved music, but I hated the fact that I had to go through all this learning basic things about how to read music, how to put my hands on the piano. I hated it. But after my teachers gave me some confidence about 2 years in, and I saw that, even in just a small local music festival competition, I could beat the other kids and I was good, it gave me more confidence and really wanted to make me pursue music, maybe not as a career, but definitely more seriously.
Anybody who goes into music, you self-identify quite early. So I went to the piano and started playing tunes that I heard on the radio. And my mother, who was quietly lurking in the shadows, said, would you like lessons? And I was like, yes, I would love lessons. So I grew up in Boston. I went to the New England Conservatory. I loved playing the piano. I loved it for the minute. I didn't love practicing, but I loved playing. So when I ended up going to Eastman for my undergrad, and it really, when I got to Eastman, it became the whole package in the sense that I loved practicing. It was all I wanted to do. And I started practicing 7 hours a day is all I wanted to do. And in many ways, my life sort of started then, because I'm the same guy. I mean, that's my passion. It's what I love. It's part of my DNA. One of the things that people have said to me from the time I started teaching was, your students all sound different. And I remember saying, well, of course they sound different. They're different people, but of course there are teachers who don't teach that way, who have a way of teaching, and their students will sound the same. And for me, I love the individuality, and I love the idea that everybody has their own pace of learning. I mean, you learn in years of teaching that when somebody wants to do something, there's a time when that window's going to open and boom, it's going to happen. And your job is always to be vigilant and make sure they're aware, so that when that moment happens, it happens. So your role is really to be driving, to be on the bridge of the ship, steering that ship and always seeing where it is.
So I've been teaching for about 3 or 4 years now. When I first started off, I had pretty much no idea what I was doing, because having been, a student all my life, you go up to this young kid and you watch them play and you think, well, what do I tell them? Where do I start? Do I start at the level that I want to, or do I start at the level that I think they need? Or what's the first thing that I'm going to say that's going to positively impact them to do better? The biggest thing, especially in those early stages of learning music, is not focusing on their technique or on their musicality or on their devotion to practice. It's about getting them interested, because a lot of the kids that study music, and sometimes more than half the cases, it's parents that force them to play piano because they think it's going to help them with school. Sometimes it's because their friends can all play instruments and they just want to be like them, and they just want to be able to show off to their friends. There's very rarely do you come across students that say, you know what, I'm in it because I love piano and I love music and I want to learn. I think with every kid, the teaching approach has to be different. If I just take a look at 4 students that I have right now currently, I can see that everyone learns differently. I could take one kid by example and say, when his parents are in the room, he cannot play. He's so nervous in front of his parents because his parents are really strict on him. You say, you better play good for the teacher. When his parents leave the room, it's a whole other person. And so sometimes when it comes to these things, especially with young kids talking to their families, improving themselves isn't just about practice, it's about mental practice. How to make them feel comfortable at making music and how to make them believe in themselves.
I think, it's interesting hearing Thomas talk about teaching. One of the things I learned in teaching at a more advanced level is the very most talented students, one of the things you have to teach them to do is to forgive themselves. Because we all beat ourselves up after we play. We wildly magnify the things that we didn't do, that we heard.
And so sometimes the teacher needs to make the kid understand that there is nothing to be afraid about. You're here not to perform for me, you're here to learn. And I think trying to get them to understand that it's a learning experience and that they're going to be better through this is something that I have to sort of do as a parent, as a musical guidance.
I mean, teaching it's like parenting. You don't choose your kid. I mean, I do choose my students, but I don't choose them on whether I like them or not. I choose them on whether they have a certain kind of talent, and I choose them on whether they have a certain kind of attitude. And the attitude is one of learning.
Music is just one of those things that I think for everybody it's a universal language. That's what it's been most commonly described as. It can make us experience things, feel emotions that we otherwise would have never been able to experience. And it can bring back memories, and it can also communicate in new ways that simply we just can't reach across. And I think one of the reasons why the music that we play is still alive today is because it reaches a certain point in us humans that simply other stuff just doesn't. That's not to say other stuff isn't valid or isn't good. It just doesn't have that effect as what we do. And I think passing down what we do as classical musicians is not just because of tradition. It's because we see that there are people that are interested in it and that this is their future.
And music transcends words. Music touches emotions. That's the irony of teaching. Is that music speaks of things that we have no words for, and touches emotions, and it makes our souls come alive. And that happens when we play concerts. Any great civilization in a way can be measured by the level of the art that's as part of that civilization. As I've described to my friends, I said, once it started, I said, I can't believe they pay us money to do this. We should be paying them. We're getting to do everything we always wanted to do, and we're getting better at it every day. He said, shh, don't tell anybody that.